Welcome to the Creative Commons RX podcast. Before diving into this episode, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.
All right, let's dive into a bit of a medical detective story. This is a story where everyday stuff, things you might have under your sink right now, can turn into deadly poisons. And the weirdest part? The real culprit is our own body's chemistry.
I know, it's a weird question, right? But it gets right to the heart of the problem here. Because, some of the most dangerous poisons out there are hiding in plain sight. And as we're going to see, they can be, well, deceptively inviting.
So what are we actually talking about here? The term toxic alcohols refers to chemicals like methanol and ethylene glycol. But here's the kicker, the really crucial point. The danger isn't the alcohol itself. Nope, it's what our own bodies turn it into. It's like a case of mistaken identity, but on a metabolic level.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story begins, as so many of these do, in the emergency room.
You've got a patient who's confused, maybe they feel sick, they're breathing way too fast. These symptoms, they could be anything, 100 different things. But the medical team, especially if they're thinking toxicology, knows that the clock is ticking. Every single second they spend trying to figure this out, some invisible poison could be doing some serious permanent damage. So how in the world do you solve a poisoning like this? You've got no witnesses, the clues are super vague. Well, the detectives here, the toxicologists, they know exactly where to start looking for evidence. And that first clue, it's hidden in the patient's blood chemistry.
You see, in medicine, we expect all the numbers in a blood test to add up. They should balance out. But when they don't, that creates what we call a gap. And for a toxicologist, finding one of these gaps, man, that's like finding a fresh footprint at a crime scene. It's a huge clue that tells them something is in the blood that just shouldn't be there.
Okay, so the first of these clues is the anion gap. Think of this one as the fingerprint left behind by the poison's toxic byproduct. As the body breaks down the toxic alcohol, it creates a ton of acid, and this acid in the blood creates that gap in the lab results. The thing is, this is a late-stage clue. When you see this gap getting wider, it means the damage is happening right now.
Now, the second clue is something called the osmolau gap. This one is totally different. It's the footprint of the original alcohol, the parent compound, before the body has had a chance to break it down. So this is an early clue. It's highest right after someone has ingested the poison. It tells you the stuff just got into their system.
And here's the really cool part. These two gaps, they have this perfect seesaw relationship. So right at the beginning, the osmolar gap is way up high. But then, as the body gets to work metabolizing that alcohol, the osmolar gap starts to fall. And at the exact same time, the anion gap starts to rise as all that toxic acid builds up. That switch, it's pretty much a dead giveaway for a toxic alcohol poisoning.
All right, so the evidence is pointing straight at a toxic alcohol. Now it's time to line up the usual suspects. Let's take a look at the three main culprits in this poisoner's gallery.
First on our list is methanol. You might know it as wood alcohol, and you find it in stuff like windshield washer fluid. When our body gets a hold of this stuff, it turns it into a really powerful acid. And that acid has a terrifying preference for the optic nerve and parts of the brain. And the result is just awful. Permanent blindness and severe neurological damage. So how does this even happen? Well, think of an enzyme in your liver called alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH for short. Think of it like a factory. This ADH enzyme takes the harmless methanol and converts it into formaldehyde, and then into formic acid. And that stuff, formic acid, that's the real poison. It goes to work shutting down the energy production in our cells, especially in the eye.
Okay, suspect number 2, ethylene glycol. This is the stuff in antifreeze. And yep, this is the one with that dangerously sweet taste we mentioned at the start. But its MO? Totally different from methanol's. ethylene glycol wages an all-out assault on the kidneys. And guess who the unwitting accomplice is again? Yep, our old friend, the ADH enzyme. It takes the ethylene glycol and turns it into glycolic acid, that's what causes the acidosis, and then into something called oxalic acid. Now, this oxalic acid is bad news. It hooks up with calcium in the blood and forms these tiny, razor-sharp crystals. We're talking about microscopic shards of glass that just physically shred the delicate little tubes inside the kidneys. And that brings us to our final suspect, isopropanol, better known as rubbing alcohol. Now, this one's a little different. It's kind of like the red herring in our mystery. It's definitely toxic, don't get me wrong, but it breaks the pattern of the other two. And that difference? It's a massive clue for the doctors trying to solve the case. So here's the absolute key. Isopropanol gets metabolized by the same ADH enzyme, but instead of a toxic acid, it gets turned into acetone. Yeah, the same stuff your body makes if you're on a keto diet. This causes something called ketosis, but, and this is the important part, it doesn't create that dangerous metabolic acidosis. So if the doctors see a patient who looks drunk, has ketosis, but their anion gap is totally normal, boom, they know they're almost certainly dealing with isopropanol. Okay, so the culprit is identified, but the clock is still ticking, big time. Now it's a race against time to neutralize the poison before it does any more catastrophic damage. The strategy here is actually beautiful in its simplicity. If the ADH enzyme is the factory that's churning out deadly poison from harmless raw materials, what do? You shut down the factory. The entire goal of the antidote is to block that ADH enzyme and stop the production line dead in its tracks. And we've got two main ways to pull this off. The modern hero of this story is a drug called fomepizole. It's just clean. It's a direct, safe, and incredibly effective inhibitor of that ADH enzyme. The old guard, the old school method, is actually just ethanol, regular alcohol. It works because the ADH enzyme loves ethanol way more than the other stuff. So if you flood the system with ethanol, the enzyme gets so busy working on that, it doesn't have time to make the real poisons. It's clever, for sure, but it's messy. So while the antidote is shutting down the poison factory, the medical team still has to clean up the mess that's already been made. That means giving IV bicarbonate to fight off all that dangerous acid in the blood. And they also give high doses of certain vitamins, like thiamine and folate, which act like little helpers to encourage the body to clear out any toxic byproducts that have already been created. But what about the really, really severe cases, when the poison levels are just dangerously high? Well, for that, there's the ultimate solution, hemodialysis. This is like calling in the ultimate cleanup crew. A machine basically acts as an artificial kidney, physically filtering the patient's blood, pulling out both the original toxic alcohol and its deadly metabolites. In these cases, it is an absolute lifesaver. So the antidote is in, the acid is being neutralized, the toxins are being cleared out, and our patient is finally on the road to recovery. The case is closed. So what is the big lessons here? What should we take away from all this? Let's just quickly recap the absolute must-know points. Number 1, it's not the alcohol itself, it's the metabolites that are the real killers. That's the whole game. Number 2, the diagnosis all comes down to minding the gaps. The osmolol and anion gaps are your big clues. Third, the treatment is all about one thing, blocking that ADH enzyme. And number 4, fomepizole is the modern antidote of choice. You know, it's pretty incredible when you step back and think about it. Just by understanding this one little metabolic pathway, we can literally step in and stop a deadly poison in its tracks. And this whole life-saving science, it all started with someone noticing a simple gap in the numbers, just a little clue hidden in a routine blood test that unraveled a massive medical mystery. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other huge medical discoveries are just waiting to be found, hidden in plain sight right inside our own bodies?
This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.